So thanks everyone for tuning in to this webinar. So my name's Jared, I'm from Resource Recovery Group, and our education program that we run, it's called Recycle Right. So in celebration of National Recycling Week, we thought we'd host a webinar focusing on earth cycling and community gardens and how to enrich our soils. So we're doing things a bit differently today. We're actually set up and broadcasting this webinar from the APACE nursery in North Fremantle. There's a community garden right here behind me as well. And we've got an awesome panel of experts joining us today to give presentations covering different topics around community gardens and composting as well, and the process behind making compost, which is really cool. So we've got George Finch, who is a community gardener here at APACE, who will be giving a presentation talking about all things APACE and how to get involved in the community garden here. And then we're going to go over to Amy Warne, who works at the North Fremantle Social Farm, and we'll be talking all things the North Freo Social Farm, and also with a focus on natives. This is a couple of cool, awesome projects going on there with native plants at the moment. And then last but not least, we'll have Dave Farthing from Purearth for a compost processor who actually receive FOGO-derived materials to be turned into compost. So for those that don't know, FOGO means food organics and garden organics. It's part of a new bin that's being rolled out across Perth. Some councils have this bin, some councils not yet, but you will be hearing about FOGO in the next couple of years, definitely. So we'll kick things off anyway. Oh, and sorry, by the way, just a bit of housekeeping. Each of the presentations will go for about 5 or 7 minutes, and we'll have time for questions afterwards. So feel free to type in your questions in the chat. And then we'll have even more time for questions towards the end of the webinar as well. So please type in your questions as we go along. But yeah, we'll kick things off anyway with George.
Thanks, Jared.
Thanks, George.
Just checking my sound is on. Yes. So hello, everyone. So I'm a community gardener here at APACE Nursery. And I also happen to be a volunteer for APACE involved in plant propagation. Just a bit of brief background on APACE, which is a not-for-profit organisation based in Johanna Street in North Fremantle. APACE Nursery has been operating as a nursery since 1989, and APACE itself is now in its 40th year. So APACE Nursery specialises in plant propagation for native plants within this one coastal plain and in the hills, in the adjacent hills, Darling Ranges. APACE was established in '82, as I said, and currently is up to a stage of producing about 480,000 plants, native plants, every year. Its principal services cover plant propagation and also bushland revegetation services, seed collection, processing and storage, and also education programs. APACE, an important part of APACE's charter is to provide work opportunities for disadvantaged people, and also including students from a number of local schools. There is a very strong volunteer base of around 30 people, and APACE has 18 employees. So, and if any, I'll just stop at that point. If anyone's any interest in joining as a volunteer, please contact APACE. They're always keen to have more people from within the community involved. So APACE also sells plants on a retail basis, and every year has a very successful plant subsidy scheme run in conjunction with 10 local councils. So we move on to the community gardens now. And so I'm standing here in the community gardens. These gardens were established in 1985 and this is actually the oldest community garden in Perth. The area covered here is around 1/4 of an acre, or maybe a little bit more, maybe 1,200 square meters. And there are 35 plots here. And the plot size varies from as little as 2 square meters and up to about 25 to 30 square meters. So we have 35 couples and single people involved. Vegetables are grown following strictly organic principles, so no chemical pesticides or herbicides are permitted. And gardeners live locally in Fremantle and surrounding areas. They pay up to $150 per annum, which covers water, and about half of that cost is to do with water, and also other activities and the provision of replacement of materials. So the gardeners have after-hours access to the gardens, and when the nursery is closed. Water supplies is supplied daily using scheme water, and also recycled water from the plant nursery. One of the gardeners that we have here, we're lucky to have a horticulturalist who has a garden here, who's very happy to provide advice to people on an as-needs basis. And where we're actually doing the filming here, we're right by what we call our olive tree. We're under an olive tree, and we have social gatherings here every week. Gardeners make their own compost, and to ensure recycling of green vegetable waste, and also to improve the quality of the soil on an ongoing basis. Anyone interested in the plot really is encouraged to do that through APACE, directly through APACE, and they'll be referred on to someone such as myself within the community gardens that can talk a bit more about the community gardens and how they operate. We operate with a waiting list, which is usually quite small, and people typically might have to wait 2 to 6 months for a plot to become available. These gardens are run by the gardeners themselves, and we have a very small number of officers that are engaged on an annual basis at the time of the AGM. So that's probably all I have to say at the moment, Jared. So
thanks, George.
Back to Jared.
So if you want to stay there, George, we haven't had any questions come through on the chat yet, but I thought I'd ask a question.
Yeah.
How do you guys go about managing, pests and bugs, caterpillars?
Because there are quite a few organic alternatives available.
Mm-hmm.
So an example is pyrethrum, which works really well on a range of pests. And there are organic oil-based sprays that you can use, such as neem oil and eco oil. And also we have whitefly here, as you'll find anywhere where you grow cabbages, etc., broad beans, and soapy water will work really well. I actually don't bother about whitefly because my broad beans grow really happily.
Right.
And same apply. We don't use herbicides. We just remove by hand weeds by hand.
Okay.
Yep.
Great. Oh, there you go. We have a question.
Yes, the question is, do people share seeds? And they certainly do. So I'm a member of a seed retailing company and buy seeds from there. And from time to time, I have surplus seeds and I share them with other people. And yes, people do work in other, we have a number of gardeners that we call backup gardeners. So if I'm away for a month, I know who the backup gardeners are, and I'll contact them, and someone will always be looking after my plot. Yep.
Great.
We don't have wicking beds here, no.
No wicking beds. All right.
No.
George, again. That was really insightful. It's really interesting to learn about what's going on here at APACE. But we're going to keep things moving now. And so I'm going to hand it over to Amy from the North Freo Social Farm. So over to you, Amy.
Hi, everyone. Lovely to be here. I'm just going to get my PowerPoint online and see. Yeah, great. So I'll just start by acknowledging that the farm is on Wajak Noongar Budja, so on Aboriginal land, and acknowledge elders past, present and emerging. And I'll get going with my little presentation about our farm in North Fremantle, which is actually just around the corner from APACE, not far at all. So the farm started in 2016. That's when they first converted it from a bowling green. So you can see the bowling green there in the top corner, and it was quite a big job, a lot of infrastructure to get in place to make it into the garden beds that we have today, which you see on the right hand side of the screen. And it's so the top layer of soil was taken out, and then we brought in soil that was suitable. So being so close to the ocean, so close to the beach, we're virtually working on beach sands. So keeping those organics in the soil is really important. But we did start by importing that into the garden there. I'll tell you a little bit about the way it works, because it's a bit different to other community gardens where you have allotments, as in at APACE, as George was saying. So they have plots of land that are allocated to certain families, whereas with us at the farm, we all work together on the whole site, and we grow the veggies with volunteers. And then we also have members. So members pay quite a big fee in their membership fee to be able to come and pick the veggies at any time. So the members get the keys to the gate and they can unlock it, come in at any time and harvest their veggies. And we note that by putting a little pick me sign when the veggies are ready to be harvested. Yep. So our little mantra at the farm is to grow, learn and connect. So we grow enough food for 200 members to collect a couple of items of food every week. And we also have surplus veggies. And when we do, which is pretty much every week, we send probably an average of 2 or 3 boxes of veggies to St. Pat's in Fremantle every week as well. And they prepare food for those who need it in the community. So that's a really lovely little side project of the farm. And learn, we do lots of workshops, roughly six workshops a year. And they're free or discounted for members. And we also have Connect, which is, we say that we take that social farm part of social farming very seriously. So every day we're there, we stop and have a cup of tea and have a good chat with those who are there working together. So we have lots of volunteers at the farm, and it works really well. Here are some pictures of the farm and the crew coming to pick their veggies on a regular basis. We had a fantastic crop of garlic that seems to go really well at the farm. Yeah, so that's the kind of produce that we make. And so Jared asked me to talk about the new bush tucker garden that we have just installed maybe about 4 months ago, and it's going really, really well. So we got some advice from APACE, again, our friends just around the corner, on what kind of bush tucker plants do well. So APACE are absolutely experts in local native plants. So we built the garden bed and put in the soil that we needed. So we did, because it was just a big empty area, we had to buy in the soil. And so this is a special native garden mix, and it has very limited amount of organics in it and a very high amount of free draining soil, because getting that drainage for our native locals is really important. So we planted a variety of bush tucker gardens, and we also installed some trees, and that's what we did. So Jared asked me to give advice on planting natives and how much compost they need and that kind of thing. So we can see here we're using tube stock, so just a little tiny seedlings for most of the plants that we put in. And we did put in a fertilizer tablet for each seedling, which just gives them a really good start to their life, because of course in a nursery at APACE they do everything they can to get them growing really well and happy, and if you just plonk them in typical native soil, if you like, in Perth, they do suffer a little bit, and they can get transplant shock. So a little bit of fertilizer to help them through and help them settle in that first kind of 3 to 4 months. It's a slow release fertilizer, just really helps them settle in. And we also put in a little extra handful of compost. So compost is not too strong for natives. And we mixed it into the little hole, planted our seedling, and then very importantly, watering that in. And you can use sea salt to water in, but not a high nitrogen or phosphate-based fertilizer, liquid fertilizer. So just a little bit of sea salt works well to settle them in. And then, of course, mulching, which you can see in the right corner, the right-hand side of the photo there. The garden bed is mulched with coarse wood chips, and you can often get them from recycling yards and that kind of thing for free. Jared will probably tell you about that. So you can get free wood chips from most councils to be able to put a thick layer of mulch to really help with that water retention for your native gardens. And this section of the garden, we've put in drip line. You can't see it there because it hadn't been installed at that point, but we put drip line irrigation in throughout that garden bed so that we can water it just a little bit through the first summer, and then a little bit less through the second summer, and then hopefully by the third summer, those seedlings will be properly established and ready to rock and roll. And I can tell you already that these seedlings are jumping out of the ground. They're looking really healthy. I'm really pleased with how that little garden bed is going. Yeah, we've got my favourite plant there is the chocolate lily, where the beautiful purple flowers smell like chocolate. So they're really going well. And it's a bush tucker food where the tuber is edible. So we haven't harvested much yet out of the garden, a little bit of salt bush, but nothing too much. But I'm looking forward to being able to harvest some bush tucker and use it in cooking in the future. Yeah, so that's going really well. So that's the bush tucker area. And just wanted to kind of give a little bit more about how to get involved at North Freo Social Farm. So we do have volunteering days 3 days a week, but just at the moment we're at capacity for volunteers. So if you're interested, just keep an eye open for our next induction day, which will probably be early next year. And I mentioned earlier that we run workshops and busy bees, which are open to anyone to come and enjoy. You don't have to be a member to come and enjoy that. And I also already mentioned that we do contribute some food to St. Pat's on a weekly basis. Yeah, so that's my wrap up of North Freo Social Farm, I think, unless anyone's got any question.
Thanks for that, Amy. That was awesome. See, I'm just checking the chat right now. Can you still be a member?
Yeah, so one of the problems that we have at the farm and our limitation is that we have limited number of members. So unfortunately at the moment we're full, and we have a waiting list as well. So you can join as a social member, which means that you get the hat that you might have seen in some of the photos, and you can get the discounted workshops, and you can participate in our olive oil pressing, which we do once a year. But you can't pick the veggies. We just can't grow enough veggies for everyone. So we do have to limit the numbers. So you can become a social member in the meantime, and you can get on the list to become a full member at some point in the future. Yep.
Thanks for that, Amy. Doesn't look like we've had any other questions come in yet, but yeah, everyone who's viewing, feel free to type in your questions. We'll also have more time towards the end of the webinar for more questions and discussion as well. For now, let's move on to Dave at Purearth. Purearth's a composting processor, and Dave is going to talk all things composting. Thanks, Dave.
No worries. Thanks, Jared, and thanks all for attending today. Well, first up, a bit of background on Purearth. A family-owned business started in around 2002 by two brothers, Paul and Sean Curtis. Currently, the composting facility is in Warne. For those in Perth, that's just behind the BP Lakes service station on your way out to Northern or York, heading east, or 54 kilometres from the Perth CBD. The site's been operational since 2015 up here, and because we do composting on a commercial scale, we have to be licensed by DWER. DWER being Department of Water and Environmental Regulations. So, yeah, there's a few hurdles that the boys had to jump through to get the license, but they managed to get that and have been operating here since 2015. So, what is composting? Well, composting is the natural process of recycling organic matter such as leaves and food scraps into valuable fertiliser that can enrich soil and plants. So that is anything that grows or consumes oxygen can be, well, it will eventually decompose. And here at Purearth, we just speed that process up by what we do, and the product out the end, as farmers call it, it's black gold. What goes into the soil to make your plants grow good and strong. And as Amy alluded to, that little bit of compost in the tube stock seedlings certainly gave them a kick along. And yeah, she's very much looking forward to the fruits of that little labour exercise. So the Purearth process. So we are a hot composter. So basically we do big windrows of around 700 to 800 cubic metres. We then put a big tarp over the top of them. We force air through the stockpiles, and we keep them at 65 degrees for 4 weeks. During that 4 weeks at 65 degrees, all the bad bugs, so any of the pathogens, weeds, stuff like that, is all killed off. So basically what we end up at the end of it is a really good pasteurised product. So from there, those windrows, off they go. They'll be left uncovered for 4 to 6 months just to mature. And that, again, it's still the process. So the stuff is still breaking down. We turn them, add oxygen, and then at the end of it, we screen the product. And out of that, we get 3 distinct fractions. One is the compost fraction. The other one is a mulch fraction. And anything that's too big gets put back through the process to become smaller and smaller and eventually end up as mulch and compost. So what are the benefits of composting? The first one is we reduce the amount of waste that gets sent to landfill. Now, as we know, landfill is bad. Landfill is where a lot of greenhouse gases are emitted from, i.e. methane. And of course, reducing those greens and that food waste out of landfill certainly helps that. Once we use compost into soils, it improves soil health. So that soil health then allows the plants to use the nutrients in the soil. Now, whether that be the added fertiliser or the nutrients that are already there, but it would also lessen erosion. Instead of the water running through or across the top and washing it away, it allows the water to penetrate the soil and stay in the soil. And by doing that, it also conserves the water because it retains it inside the soil structure itself, allowing the plants easy access to that water and nutrients to, again, it's there at the tip of my tongue, to allow the plants to use it and grow stronger and produce better crops. So what can be composted? Now, as Jared touched on earlier, Purearth do have a relationship with the RRG, and we take a processed FOGO fraction. Now, that is basically anything that goes through your kitchen or anything that goes through your garden. So fruit, vegetable scraps, used tea and coffee grounds, crushed eggshells, straw, paper, cardboard, dried leaves, woody prunings. So basically, if it comes out of your garden or comes out of your kitchen, it can be composted. So where does Purearth and the Resource Recovery Group fit in? Well, the Resource Recovery Group were taking the raw FOGO from the councils with their red bins. They were processing it. And we at Purearth received what we call a minus 40 mil fraction. That is then placed through our compost process. So we'll mix that 40 mil FOGO with other greens and other liquids to make a mix. Those mixes go onto the slabs, covered, nuked, and out it comes. So just as an example, in 2022, 22,000 tonnes of FOGO was directed here to the Purearth facility. Now that's 22,000 tonnes, well over 22,000 tonnes of landfill diversion. So again, it's reducing those greenhouse gases, it's reducing the amount of stuff that is going to landfill, and it's becoming a product that we can use back in our gardens. Not only do we partner with RRG, but we do partner with other waste organisations. Those include the likes of Suez, Veolia, or Remondis. You know, we will take lily waste, we'll take the sludge waste, and we also take the minus 40 mil FOGO fraction from the RF council transfer stations. If the any access that the shires can't get rid of through their own networks, it ends up here and we turn it into compost. So where does it go? So our compost, yes, it gets put back into the markets here in Western Australia. So we supply the likes of 13 or 14 retail landscape yards. So that's your local Soils Ain't Soils, Soil Worlds, Little Loads around the Perth metro area. We also are a supplier to WALGA, being the West Australian Local Government Authority or Association. So shires and councils can buy the compost and some of the blends that we do to go back into their parks and gardens process. And we also send some of our compost into broadacre farming. Farmers are learning that putting compost/carbon back into the soil is actually increasing their yields and is reducing their reliance on synthetic fertilisers. We're doing currently some trials within 20 kilometres of the farm up here at Wootading, and the farmers are over the moon with some of the results that they're getting. So yes, it's going to be good to where it goes. So if you're looking for some FOGO derived compost into your local garden centre, all you need to do is ask for it, and they'll soon say, yes, we've got it, or no, we haven't, but if you'd like some, we can soon get it. So that's where we do, well, that's what we do briefly from a composting process. We take a waste and we turn it back into something that can be used and is beneficial for not only the gardens like Amy's down there at North Fremantle or a APACE nursery, but it's just got a wide-ranging benefits for all and sundry across not only the Perth metro area, but West Australia in general with farming. I see there was a couple of questions come up there. Jared, have you got those?
Sorry, I was going to say.
Jared's on unmute, but are composting worms used in our process?
Sorry,
no, because we because we compost at 65 degrees. That's actually not the best for earthworms or composting worms. But in a situation, yes, very good. They can be used, and of course the worm juice that comes out can be used straight up on your gardens.
Right. So we had another question.
It's coming from Suez and Veolia. Okay, so from Veolia, that would be grease trap. So that's a liquid that comes out of the grease traps from food processing or restaurants. So that is used. We also take a brewery sludge from Joe White maltings, and we also take a chicken waste from Steggles. So, various waste products that, as long as it's an organic base, it can go into our mixes and it can be composted. So hopefully that answers your question there, Amy. And Amy.
Thanks for that, Dave. So I've just got a quick question just on capacity at Purearth as more councils are rolling out to FOGO. That there are some misconceptions out there about FOGO processing capacity at the moment in Perth, which is interesting. At Resource Recovery Group, we have a lot of space for capacity for processing FOGO. Just wondering how it's going, from a Purearth perspective in terms of capacity.
Yeah, so from a capacity point of view, we have got plenty of capacity currently in the site to take more FOGO. We're also in the process of doing an expansion, which will probably pretty much double the capacity on the site. So that's probably going to be done in 2 or 3 stages. As long as we can get the feedstock from the RRG, we'll be taking as much FOGO as we can get. So I believe by 2026, I think the number is for most of the councils to be, or most of the local Perth councils to be on board with the 3rd FOGO bin. By that stage, yes, we'd have more than enough capacity in what we do here at Purearth to take what we can get from RRG.
Great. And there was one more question. What happens to the hormones given to the chickens?
Okay, those hormones will be broken down at the at that 65 degrees for the 4 weeks. At the end of every process, or at the end of every batch of compost that comes off the screen, we do send that away to the lab to be tested to Australian standards. The only test that's currently not in Australian standards for anything bad or potentially bad is PFAS, but under the Australian standard for compost, yes, we are testing for E. coli, all sorts of weird and wonderful stuff, and at the moment everything's coming back clear, and that's due to the fact that it's 65 degrees for 4 weeks. It basically kills everything.
Great. That's good to know, Dave. Awesome. All right. Well, thanks again for the presentation. Everyone who's viewing, feel free to keep typing in your questions if you have any more. I did notice just further back in the chat, there was a couple of questions about the home composting system or at a community garden. So we've actually got a camera set up now at one of the compost bins. So we're going to do a quick camera change and check out the compost bin we got here with George.
Okay, so I think you, Jared, you were just talking about composting. So at the very local level here, within the community gardens, people are using their own composting bins. There are a couple of things with composting. You've got to get the carbon-nitrogen ratio pretty right. So if you just keep chucking in, here are the waste veggie products. If you just chuck these in, you end up with just a soggy mass after a while. So what they've used here for the carbon side of things, they've used newspaper. I would use shredded paper myself. And you've got to also aerate, really important. So with this type of simple bin, you've got to keep turning it over to get the oxygen in there. We've got other bins over here behind the FOGO sign, and one of them they're using sugarcane waste. I use sugarcane waste at home, and I use a tumbling system at home, which helps get the oxygen in. So that's typically what they do in the gardens here. It works really well.
That's great. And I suppose just in terms of managing the composting systems going on here, do the volunteers, do they regularly bring in organics to drop off? Is there someone that manages?
no self-management.
Okay.
So one of the gardeners here regularly brings his own veggie scraps, etc., from home and puts them into his compost bin, which he manages here. I actually do the same, but at home.
Great.
So it's horses for courses. That's the answer there.
Oh, awesome. Good to know.
Well, Jared, do you want me to add further to that coffee question?
Sure. Sorry, while I'm just getting set up here.
Yeah, while you're doing something and it seems like your video might be stuck. Yeah, there you go, you're back again. Yes, currently coffee pods are non-compostable. Yes, the coffee grinds inside the pods. Yes, great source of nitrogen. Yeah, so unfortunately, yes, coffee pods need to be further processed to separate the two components, the aluminium pod and then the coffee grinds themselves. But the grinds themselves, yes, completely compostable.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Dave. Oh, right. Okay. There was a question about composting worms earlier. Amy, are there any composting worms that are used at the North Freo social farm?
That was my question to Dave, actually.
Oh.
But, I wondered whether the worms actually came into the system while it was sitting around for, I think you said it rested for several months before it went out to customers, and I wondered whether it got to a temperature that allowed composting worms to go into the system.
No, it takes that long. It takes pretty much that long for the stuff to cool down.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, do we get worms? Yes. If I went through it, yes, you'd probably find some earthworms in there. Is there huge, great quantities? No, we're not overrun by worms. No, no. But once it's processed, yes, and it's cooled, yep. It's just a temperature thing. Yeah, by the time we move a windrow, the middle of the windrows is still at 35, 40 degrees. So still a bit warm for the worms.
Yep, understand. If people are interested, we use worms a lot at the North Freo Social Farm. We have 2 worm farms made out of old fridges. So if you're going to do that kind of worm farm, you need to get a degassed fridge, but they make fantastic worm farms because they're nice and insulated. And then we use, every time we plant a seedling in the garden, we plant it into a little tablespoon blob of the worm castings. And I think that's really fantastic stuff. I'm a huge believer in worm castings. And then on top of that, we add compost into the garden beds as well.
Great. And just to hear from APACE, have you got worm farms here at APACE? No, there's no worm farms here. Okay. Just the compost bins. Looks like I'm frozen there. Hopefully everyone can still hear what I'm saying. Yep. Thanks, Amy. All right. I'm just going to try something really quickly. No, that didn't work. Okay, well, my video is not working, but that's okay. It looks like there haven't been any more questions that have come through. So I think we'll wrap it up there, but I'd just like to thank all of the presenters today. Thank you very much. Something different of us using all these cameras here at APACE. So thank you, George, for putting up with us. And of course, thanks to Amy and thanks to Dave. And thanks to everyone who tuned in. So we're going to tune out now. So see everyone later. Have a good week.
Cool. Thanks, guys. Talk to you soon.
Thank you. Thanks for having us. Bye.
There'll be a link for
Thanks, everyone. Bye.